Are you struggling choosing your secondaries? Well, follow this short guide and make that a thing of the past. Welcome back to War Academy, where the more you know, the less you lose. In this episode of Just the Tip, we're going to be going over how to choose your secondaries. And it's actually pretty easy. You can do it all at one time. If you're really struggling to pick secondaries, chances are you made your list wrong. So if you look, guys, Purge the Enemy has 2 secondaries, No Mercy, No Respect 2, Warpcraft has 3, Battlefield Supremacy has 2, Shadow Operations have 2. So each one of these secondaries can be split into 2 groups, which is things you have to build for and things that are just total gimmies. So I'm going to start with the ones that you have to build for. So one of my personal favorites being Psychic Interrogation. I love that extra CP that you can get if you beat their leadership. This can be really powerful on armies such as Tyranids that can do a 3d6 cast, and Tyranids being one of the most CP hungry armies in the game, they can take a really good advantage of Psychic Interrogation. All you have to do to be able to take this secondary is have a Psyker. So now this can be problematic because some armies, like for example Dark Angels have a really good Psyker, and to have to use him on Psychic Interrogation is kind of sad. So in a lot of armies, it's going to be good to take 2 Psykers, and you're just going to have that one, your cheapest Psyker. For example, Dark Angels, again, they could just take a normal Librarian and be able to have the normal Librarian cast the Interrogate. One other downside to Psychic Interrogation that good players usually will do, and you should be aware to do this to your opponent, is if he took Psychic Interrogation, do not put a character within 24 inches of him if you can help it. So deploy your characters a little bit farther back. If you don't need them to be up front, don't put them up front, because if you can avoid 1 Psychic Interrogation, that's permanent points that they can't get back. Now, the alternative is Warp Ritual, and Warp Ritual is kind of a mixture of a gimme and one you have to build for. So being in the middle of the board is the most dangerous place you could ever put your caster. So if you combine Warp Ritual with something like Oaths of the Moment, where you need to be within the center of the battlefield anyways, Warp Ritual can be amazing. The best part about Warp Ritual is you only need to do it 3 times, whereas Psychic Interrogation, you have to do every single turn. Warp Ritual, you only have to do 3 times. So this does give you that extra chance to get those points back if you messed up and missed it. It also makes it so your caster, like for example, I'm going to use Dark Angels again, Ezekiel, they're really good caster, he can Warp Ritual 3 turns and still cast his Fight Last twice during the game. This one can also be problematic when the battlefield doesn't have a middle objective, so you don't want to go fight for the middle when there's actually nothing there. So another one that you can easily build for when you're making your list is Retrieve Nephilim Data. Now, in order to do this one, you're going to need a squad of 6 guys that can deep strike, or 5 guys if they're troops. Can't stress the 6-man enough. Like, you might think 5-man like on a 2+ basically is going to be fine, but in a normal GT you're going to have 6 games, so that's 6 times you're going to have to do this. So one time you should just fail, and that sucks when that happens. Now, the trick to doing Nephilim is just do one of your table quarters first, the one that you usually have the least amount of hold on. You're going to retrieve Nephilim data there. Then on the second turn, usually you're going to be deep striking to retrieve Nephilim data, but sometimes you just won't have that opening, in which case it's okay to use a unit to grab your other table quarter. So the units that do this the best are going to be things like Vespid do this really well, Scourges. You want something that's really, really fast, and you want something that's infantry, so hopefully you can hide behind something so it doesn't get shot up while it's doing R&D, and then use its full move to jump to another table quarter to get you maybe R&D right away in the next turn, or jump to cover where it's nice and hidden, and then on the following turn go to that last table quarter that you need. It's definitely beneficial to have the smallest possible bases you can. So smaller bases means you can just fit into smaller places, which is a lot of times what you're going to need to do. You can't be within 6 inches of any other table quarter, which is kind of a pain in the ass. Usually, I never like to spend more than 100. 100 points is a lot to spend on retrieving Nephilim data. With all the armies I play, it's the average points of a unit that I'm going to use for R&D is probably around 70. Vespid, I think, are 72. You can get deep striking things, even things like Scions, or using deep strike stratagems. Part of the reason why retrieved Nephilim data is so good is because it combos so well with another secondary that you can build for. Behind enemy lines has pretty much been my main go-to. So back in Nachman, they had Stranglehold, which was just a really easy secondary to get. I find behind enemy lines to be just as easy. A lot of armies actually have access to very, very cheap deep striking units. So from Space Marines using things like little command squads of 2-man command squads with jump packs, or a 2-man Deathwing command squad, they can just jump in the back, get you the most behind enemy lines, sit in cover, and just be tanky. What's great is that so many people tend to spec really heavily into melee. So if you get behind someone's lines like that, and you're doing things like you're behind enemy lines and you're doing R&D, sometimes you can force a melee unit to come back just to get you. A lot of times when you have the deep strike ability, means you can probably outrun that guy too. Now there is one more you can technically build for, but guys, I never recommend taking Grind Them Down. Grind Them Down is an awful secondary, and I bet you there's tons of times where you're like, oh, I should have took Grind Them Down, and that's totally fine. But every time you take Grind Them Down, you're not going to need it, and every time you don't take Grind Them Down is the only times that you'll ever say, oh, that would have been good to take. I have watched so many battle reports. I have played so many games of 40k. I don't think I've ever seen Grind Them Down actually work. Even with some armies like Knights, I still see them go turns where it's not guaranteed. But the way you could guarantee it the best is if you were going to take, for some reason, if you wanted max squads of everything. So I'm going to use Dark Angels again as an example because Deathwing are perfect for this. A 10-man squad of Deathwing and another 10-man squad of Deathwing, that's almost half your army right there, and your unit count is going to be incredibly small because of the way you built your list. But even then, I still don't know if I'd take it. I wish I could go through every single army of secondaries. There's going to be other ones that you could build for. For example, Chaos has a lot of good ones with doing rituals and things that you can specifically build for. So you're going to have to look through your own secondaries and use this same thing when you're making the list. Put those units in first thing and go, okay, I can do this, this, and this. Once you have the ability to do those other secondaries, so meaning you're never really going to have a bad game, you can start focusing on your gimmies. So you don't know what's your opponent's going to bring, but if he brings 5 to 6 characters, chances are you're going to take Assassination. Now you got to be careful. Characters can sometimes be really hard to root out. So Assassination has ass in the name twice because it can make an ass out of you, it can make an ass out of your opponent. Somebody's going to mess up first, and either he's going to give you his character or he's going to just avoid you and you're never going to get the kill. Armies like Sisters of Battle, I've always had problems getting their characters like dug out, some of their cheaper ones. Even armies like Imperial Guard can be really tricky to get those characters, especially when they're so cheap and insignificant. On all these secondaries, guys, you're hoping to get at least a 10. So a 10 is a solid score. So things, the ones that I told you build for, if you only get, even 9 points on something like Interrogate, that's not that bad. That's still a pretty good score for your secondary. So in the same category as Assassination, we have Bring It Down. Now the trick with Bring It Down is I do not take Bring It Down unless I know they'll give up 15 points. Never expect to table your opponent. So make sure that if you get about 75% of his army, that you'll still get a good score on Bring It Down. No prisoners is another gimme. So mainly you're trying to get 100. If you get 100, you'll get that extra 2. That's 12 points. Boom. The reason why these gimmies are so important is because I'm gonna use the Dark Angels, Ezekiel again. If you can take no prisoners, if you can take, Bring It Down, you might not have to take Psychic Interrogation. You might not have to take something like Behind Enemy Lines or R&D, which just makes your life so much easier. And these gimme ones are usually tend to score a lot higher than the ones that you actually built for. You just never want to be caught with your pants down and have no good secondary to take and score a big 0 one. That's how you can lose an event or just any game. So any of you guys that use Tau or anything like that, you're already familiar with Abhor the Witch because you've probably been using it a while. I don't recommend building for Abhor the Witch, but obviously if it presents itself, take it. So the last one to talk about here is Raise the Banners. Raise the Banners is not good when the objectives are in the middle, guys. Don't think about taking Raise the Banners unless you have 2 to 3 objectives on your territory, on your half. It's a lot easier to keep those flags up. If you try to put a flag up in the middle of the board, it's going to constantly go up and down. You're going to be wasting units on doing actions. It's going to be a pain. You're not going to get very many points from it. But on things like even the scouring or retrieval, those are great missions to take raise the banners, and usually you're going to be taking that instead of retrieve Nephilim data. If you guys are wondering what website I'm using, this is wahapedia.ru, one of the greatest websites ever made. And they have a secondary little thing here where you can just check mark the army you want to do. Like if I want to do Chaos Space Marines that are word bearers. And then when I scroll down, you can see you got the Rise to Glory in the category with Assassination, Bring It Down, the Long War, etc., etc. But before you go, make sure you check out the link in the description where you can sign up for my Patreon, and I'm doing a sweet giveaway where you can win one of these 3 models. At the time of this recording, there's a 1 in 11 chance that you could win any one of these. Them's really good odds. And remember, the learning doesn't stop here. Stop by our Discord. It's pretty much set up to help you learn just about any army that you're struggling with. Whether you're someone who can help give advice to other people, or you just want to get advice from people who've been playing the game for a long time, the Discord's a great place to get more information on your army. Remember guys, this is a dice game. Don't put bad juju on your dice because you watched this video to the end and you didn't hit subscribe. That's just mean, and honestly what goes around comes around, and you're rolling dice like crazy. So don't be that guy. Hit the subscribe button. I'll see you in the next video.
Bye, have a great time.